The lightning split the sky like a jagged wound, and Helena Everett knew she was going to die out here on this God-forsaken prairie if she didn't find shelter soon. Her horse had thrown her 2 miles back when the thunder first cracked overhead, and she'd been stumbling through the tall grass of the Wyoming territory ever since, her fine Boston riding dress now torn and mud-splattered, her carefully pinned hair hanging in wet ropes down her back. The year was 1878, and she was 3,000 miles from everything she'd ever known, running from a marriage arrangement that would have destroyed her soul, only to face destruction of an entirely different kind in this endless western storm. The rain came down in sheets so thick she could barely see 10 feet ahead, and the wind howled like something alive and angry. Helena wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite it being late summer, when movement caught her eye through the downpour. A structure, dark and solid against the pale violence of the storm. She stumbled toward it, her boots sinking into the mud with each step, her lungs burning as she fought against the wind that seemed determined to push her back. As she drew closer, she could make out the shape of a small ranch house, weather-beaten but sturdy, with a barn attached on one side. Smoke rose from the chimney, immediately whipped away by the wind, and warm light glowed in the window. Hope surged through her chest, giving her the strength to push forward those last 50 yards that felt like 50 miles. She pounded on the door with numb fists, knowing her knocking probably couldn't even be heard over the storm's fury. She tried again, harder this time, and was about to try a third time when the door swung open so suddenly, she nearly fell forward into the man standing there. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the door frame and dark hair that fell across his forehead in damp waves. His eyes were a startling blue, the color of a clear winter sky, and they widened in surprise at the sight of her bedraggled form on his doorstep. He wore a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms tanned and corded with muscle, and his hand still rested on the door handle as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Please," Helena managed through chattering teeth. "I need help. My horse threw me and I've been walking and I cannot find my way back to town." The man didn't hesitate. "Get inside," he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel but not unkind. He stepped back, pulling the door wider, and Helena nearly sobbed with relief as she stumbled over the threshold into the blessed warmth of his home. The interior was simple but clean, a single large room that served as both living space and kitchen, with 2 doors on the far wall that presumably led to other rooms. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the scent of coffee and something savory cooking filled the air. Her stomach clenched with hunger, reminding her she hadn't eaten since dawn. "You are soaked through," the man said, closing the door firmly against the storm. "Wait here." He disappeared through one of the doors and returned moments later with a thick wool blanket and what looked like a clean shirt. "The bedroom is through there," he said, gesturing to the door he'd just come from. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. This shirt will be big on you, but it is dry and warm. Wrap yourself in the blanket, too." Helena took the items with trembling hands, too cold and exhausted to feel embarrassed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Go on," he said gently. "I will turn my back." She made her way into the bedroom, which was as simply furnished as the main room, containing just a bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. With fingers that barely worked, she peeled off her ruined dress, her soaked undergarments, her torn stockings. Everything was so wet it felt like trying to remove a second skin. She dried herself as best she could with a corner of the blanket, then pulled on the man's shirt, which indeed hung on her like a tent, falling almost to her knees. She wrapped the blanket around herself like a shawl and ventured back out into the main room. The man had his back to her, stirring something in a pot hanging over the fire. He'd put on his own coat, she noticed, probably to make her feel more comfortable. When he heard her footsteps, he turned and something flickered in his blue eyes there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Better?" he asked. "Much, thank you, Mr. Parker," he supplied. "Flynn Parker, and you are Helena Everett." She moved closer to the fire, drawn by its warmth. "I cannot tell you how grateful I am. I thought I was going to die out there." "You might have," Flynn said bluntly. "This is a bad storm, and it came up fast. Where were you headed?" "To Casper," Helena said. "I was staying with a family outside of Douglas, but I needed to get to Casper, and I thought I could make the ride in a day. I hired a horse from the livery, but when the storm came up, he panicked." Flynn frowned. "You rode out alone. That is dangerous country, Miss Everett, even without a storm." "I know that now," Helena said quietly. She didn't mention that she'd been desperate to put distance between herself and Boston, between herself and the suffocating expectations of her family. She'd thought the West would be freedom, but so far it had been nothing but trouble. Flynn studied her for a moment, those blue eyes seeming to see right through her blanket and borrowed shirt to the secrets she carried. But he didn't press. Instead, he ladled some of whatever he'd been cooking into a bowl and handed it to her, along with a spoon. "Venison stew," he said. "It is not fancy, but it will warm you up from the inside." Helena accepted the bowl gratefully and took a bite. It was rich and savory, seasoned with herbs she couldn't identify, and it was possibly the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. "It is wonderful," she said sincerely. Flynn poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one, then settled into a chair near the fire with his own cup cradled in his large hands. The storm continued to rage outside, rattling the windows and howling down the chimney, but inside it was warm and peaceful and strangely intimate. "You are a long way from home," Flynn observed after a moment. "Your accent gives you away as a city girl, Boston if I had to guess." "You have a good ear," Helena said, surprised. "Have you been east?" "Once, years ago, before I came out here to Wyoming." He stared into his coffee as if seeing something in its dark depths. That was another life. Helena wanted to ask what had brought him west, what had driven him to this isolated homestead in the middle of nowhere, but she sensed it wasn't something he wanted to talk about. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Outside, the storm raged on, but here in Flynn Parker's small ranch house, Helena felt safer than she had in months. She finished her stew and coffee, warmth finally beginning to seep back into her bones. Her eyes felt heavy, exhaustion from her ordeal catching up with her now that she was safe and fed and warm. Flynn noticed her fighting to keep her eyes open. "You should rest," he said. "You can take the bed. I will sleep out here by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Helena protested. "You have already done so much." "I insist," Flynn said firmly. "You have been through an ordeal and you need proper rest. Besides, I have spent plenty of nights sleeping in far less comfortable places than this." Helena was too tired to argue further. She stood, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "Thank you, Mr. Parker, truly. I do not know what would have happened to me if I had not found your home." Something softened in his expression. "You are welcome, Miss Everett. Sleep well." Helena made her way back into the bedroom and climbed into the bed, which smelled of soap and something masculine she couldn't quite place. The mattress was more comfortable than she'd expected, and the blankets were thick and warm. She should have felt strange, sleeping in a stranger's bed, wearing his shirt, sheltered in his home. But instead, she felt only relief and a curious sense of rightness, as if this was exactly where she was meant to be. She fell asleep to the sound of the storm and the occasional creak of floorboards as Flynn moved about in the other room. And for the first time since leaving Boston, she slept without nightmares. Helena woke to sunlight streaming through the small window and the smell of bacon frying. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, and then it all came rushing back. The storm, her desperate stumble through the rain, Flynn Parker standing in his doorway like some kind of salvation. She sat up, running her hands through her tangled hair, and winced. She must look absolutely frightful. Her dress was presumably still wet, hanging wherever Flynn had put it to dry. She had nothing else to wear except his oversized shirt and the blanket. A soft knock came at the door. "Miss Everett, I have heated some water for washing if you would like. And I put your dress near the fire last night. It should be mostly dry now, though I am afraid it is rather worse for wear." "Thank you," Helena called. "That is very kind." She heard him set something down outside the door, then his footsteps retreating. She waited a moment, then opened the door to find a basin of steaming water, a cloth, and a sliver of soap. Her dress was draped over a chair near the fire, and he was right. It was a disaster. The hem was torn, mud stains covered the skirt, and one of the sleeves was ripped at the shoulder. But it was dry, and it was hers, and she couldn't very well continue wearing Flynn's shirt. She took the basin back into the bedroom and washed as best she could, grateful for the warm water and the privacy. Then she struggled back into her ruined dress, trying to pin her hair into something resembling respectability with the few pins she could find that hadn't fallen out during her ordeal. When she emerged, Flynn was setting plates on the small table. He'd put on a clean shirt, she noticed, and his dark hair was damp, as if he'd washed as well. He looked up as she entered, and again that strange flicker passed through his eyes. "You look better," he said. "How do you feel?" "Much better, thank you. A bit sore, but nothing serious." She gestured to her dress. "I am afraid this is rather beyond saving." "When the weather clears, I will ride you into Douglas," Flynn said. "You can get proper clothes there and arrange for transportation to Casper if you still mean to go there." "I do," Helena said, though she felt a strange reluctance at the thought of leaving. "I have an aunt in Casper who is expecting me." Flynn gestured for her to sit, and she did, accepting the plate of bacon, eggs, and fried bread he handed her. They ate in companionable silence, and Helena found herself studying him when he wasn't looking. He had strong features, a straight nose and a firm jaw with a hint of stubble. There were lines around his eyes as if he'd spent a lot of time squinting into the sun, and his hands, wrapped around his coffee cup, were calloused and scarred, the hands of a man who did hard physical work every day. "How long have you had this ranch?" she asked. "About 5 years now," Flynn said. "It is not much, but it is mine. I run cattle, some horses, enough to get by." "It must be lonely," Helena said, then immediately regretted it. "I am sorry, that was impertinent," but Flynn didn't seem offended. "It is lonely sometimes," he admitted. "But I prefer it to the alternative." "Which is?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee again. "Being around people who expect things from you that you cannot give," he finally said. "Out here, I answer to no one but myself." Helena understood that sentiment all too well. It was exactly why she'd fled Boston, why she'd defied her parents and broken off her engagement to Charles Morrison, the wealthy banker's son her father had chosen for her. Charles had been handsome and charming in public, but in private, he'd been controlling and cold, with a cruel streak he'd barely bothered to hide once the engagement was official. "I understand more than you might think," she said softly. Flynn met her eyes, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared experience, of mutual understanding. The moment stretched, neither of them looking away, and Helena felt her breath catch in her throat. Then Flynn cleared his throat and stood, gathering the dishes. The storm has passed. I should check on the horses and see what damage the wind did. You are welcome to look around if you like. There are some books on the shelf there, though I am afraid they are not very exciting. Mostly practical guides and a few old novels. I am sure they are fine, Helena said, trying to shake off whatever had just happened between them. Thank you. Flynn nodded and headed outside, and Helena was left alone in the quiet house. She moved to the window and watched him walk toward the barn, his long stride easy and confident. He moved like a man completely comfortable in his own skin, completely at home in this wild country. She turned away from the window and examined the room more carefully in the daylight. It was indeed simple, but there were small touches that suggested Flynn Parker was more than just a rough cowboy. The books on the shelf were well worn but carefully kept. A sketch of a mountain landscape hung on one wall, surprisingly skillful. A small wooden horse sat on the mantel, carved with obvious care and attention to detail. Helena picked up the horse, running her fingers over its smooth lines. Who was Flynn Parker, really? What had driven him west? What secrets did those blue eyes hold? She was still holding the carved horse when the door opened and Flynn came back in, brushing water droplets from his shoulders. Still raining a bit, he said, but nothing like last night. We should be able to ride to Douglas tomorrow if you feel up to it. Tomorrow. The word hung in the air between them. Helena should have felt relieved. She needed to get to Casper, to her aunt's house, to start building the new life she'd come west to find. But instead, she felt a strange sense of loss at the thought of leaving this place, of never seeing Flynn Parker again. "This is beautiful," she said, holding up the horse. "Did you carve it?" Flynn's expression softened slightly. "I did. Years ago. Carving helps me think. You are very talented." He shrugged, seeming uncomfortable with the compliment. "It passes the time." He moved to the fireplace and added a log to the flames. "The rain should stop by evening. You will have another night here, I am afraid." "I am not afraid," Helena said, and meant it. She set the horse back on the mantel carefully. "Mr. Parker, I feel I should explain why I was riding alone, why I am out here at all." "You do not owe me any explanations," Flynn said. "I know, but I want to tell you." Helena took a breath. "I was engaged to be married back in Boston. To a man my father chose for me. A good match by society's standards. Wealthy, connected, respectable. But he was not a good man. He was cruel and controlling, and I knew that marriage to him would destroy me. So I broke off the engagement and used my mother's inheritance, which had just come to me when I turned 22, to book passage west. My father was furious. He disowned me. My mother cried but did nothing to help me. The only family member who supported me was my Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, who moved to Casper years ago. She wrote to me and said I could come stay with her, start fresh out here." Flynn had turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intent on her face. "That took courage," he said quietly. "Leaving everything you knew. Or stupidity," Helena said with a weak laugh. "I have been wondering which it was ever since my horse threw me in that storm." "Courage," Flynn said firmly. "Definitely courage." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something internally. Then he said, "I know something about running from an unwanted future. I was supposed to take over my father's shipping business in Philadelphia. He had it all planned out. I would marry the daughter of his business partner, merge the companies, carry on the family legacy. But I did not want that life. I did not love the girl, though she was nice enough. I did not want to spend my days behind a desk, managing ledgers and playing political games with other businessmen. So one day I just left. Bought a horse, pointed it west, and rode until I found a place that felt like home. That was 7 years ago. My father probably still curses my name." "Do you ever regret it?" Helena asked, Flynn considered the question. "Sometimes I regret the pain I caused," he said honestly. "My mother especially. She did not deserve that, but regret the choice itself. No, out here I am free. I answer to no one but myself. I live by my own rules, make my own choices. That is worth everything I gave up." Helena moved closer to him, drawn by his honesty, by the understanding she saw in his eyes. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know this was where you belonged?" "I did not at first," Flynn admitted. "I drifted for a while, working on different ranches, learning the trade. But when I found this piece of land, when I stood on that rise out there and looked at this valley with the mountains in the distance, something in me settled. I knew I was home." They stood there, close enough that Helena could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, could smell the scent of rain and leather and something uniquely him. Her heart was beating faster than it should, and she knew she should step back, should put proper distance between them. But she didn't want to. "I envy you that," she said softly. "That certainty." "You will find it," Flynn said. "Your place, your purpose. Give yourself time." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Helena didn't have a name for. Then Flynn cleared his throat and stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should see to some chores," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Make yourself comfortable. There is more coffee if you want it." He left quickly, almost as if he was fleeing, and Helena stood alone by the fire, her heart still racing, wondering what had just happened and what it meant. The rest of the day passed in a strange dance of proximity and distance. Flynn found tasks that kept him mostly outside, though he came in periodically to check on her, to bring in more firewood, to start preparing the evening meal. Helena tried to make herself useful, though she had to admit her domestic skills were limited. She'd been raised to supervise servants, not to actually cook or clean herself. "Let me help with supper," she offered when Flynn came in as the sun was starting to set. "You do not need to do that," Flynn said. "I want to, please. I feel useless just sitting around while you do everything." Flynn hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Do you know how to cut vegetables?" "I can learn," Helena said determinedly. He showed her how to peel and cut potatoes and carrots, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he guided her through the motions. They worked side by side, and Helena was acutely aware of every time his arm brushed hers, every time their hands touched as he handed her something. "You are a good teacher," she said as she finished the last potato. "You are a quick learner," Flynn replied. He added the vegetables to the pot with some beef and seasoning, then hung it over the fire. "It will need to simmer for a while." They sat together as the stew cooked, and gradually conversation began to flow more easily. Flynn told her about the challenges of ranching in Wyoming, about harsh winters and summer droughts, about dealing with rustlers and predators. Helena told him about life in Boston, about the endless social obligations and the suffocating expectations, and found herself laughing as she described some of the more ridiculous society events she'd been forced to attend. "You wore a dress that weighed 30 pounds, Flynn asked, incredulous. "At least," Helena confirmed. "For my coming out ball, I could barely walk in it, let alone dance, but it was the height of fashion, so of course I had to wear it." Flynn shook his head. "I will never understand city folk." "Neither will I," Helena said. "Not anymore." They ate their stew, which Helena had to admit tasted even better for having helped prepare it, and then Flynn pulled out a worn deck of cards. "You play poker?" he asked. "I do, actually," Helena said. "My brother taught me before he went off to university. My mother was horrified." Flynn grinned, and Helena realized it was the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less guarded. "Well then, Miss Everett, prepare to lose." But Helena didn't lose. She won 3 hands out of 5, and by the end, Flynn was looking at her with new respect. "You are a card sharp," he accused, but there was amusement in his voice. "I am just good at reading people," Helena said. "You have a tell. When you have a good hand, you tap your finger twice on the table." Flynn looked down at his hand as if it had betrayed him. "I do not. You do. You just did it again." He laughed, a real laugh this time, deep and genuine, and the sound of it did something to Helena's insides. She found herself laughing too, and for a moment, all the hardship of the past weeks fell away. And there was just this, sitting by a fire in a small ranch house in Wyoming territory, laughing with a man she'd known for less than a day but who somehow felt familiar, like coming home. The laughter faded slowly, leaving them smiling at each other across the small table. The firelight cast dancing shadows across Flynn's face, highlighting the strong planes of his features. Helena's breath caught as she saw the way he was looking at her, something intense and almost hungry in his blue eyes. "Helena," he said, her name a low rumble in his chest. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and hearing it in his voice sent a shiver through her. "Yes." He seemed to struggle with something, then shook his head. "It is late. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long ride to Douglas." He was right, of course. It was late and she should be tired, but she didn't want this evening to end. She didn't want to go back into that bedroom and close the door, creating distance between them. "Flynn," she said, using his name deliberately, watching his eyes darken at the sound of it. "Thank you for everything. For taking me in, for your kindness, for treating me like a person and not a burden or a problem to be solved." "You are not a burden," Flynn said firmly. "You are." He trailed off, seeming to think better of whatever he'd been about to say. "You are welcome, truly." Helena stood, and Flynn stood with her. They were close again, as they'd been earlier, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. "Good night, Flynn," she said softly. "Good night, Helena." She forced herself to walk away, into the bedroom, closing the door gently behind her. She leaned against it for a moment, her heart pounding, wondering what was happening to her. She barely knew this man. 24 hours ago, she hadn't even known he existed. And yet something had shifted inside her, some fundamental change she couldn't name but could feel in every fiber of her being. She changed into Flynn's shirt again, having nothing else to sleep in, and climbed into his bed. But sleep was a long time coming. She lay awake, listening to the sounds of Flynn moving around in the other room, the creak of the chair as he settled by the fire, the occasional pop and hiss of the logs burning. And she wondered if he was finding sleep as elusive as she was, if he was thinking about her the way she was thinking about him, if this strange connection between them was as real as it felt or just a product of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought her to his door. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Helena woke to find her dress had been cleaned somehow, the worst of the mud stains scrubbed out, though it was still torn and bedraggled. There were clothes laid out on the chair in the bedroom, women's clothes, simple but clean and in decent repair. She opened the door to find Flynn already up, coffee brewing, breakfast cooking. He looked tired, she thought, as if he hadn't slept well either. "Good morning," she said. "Morning." He gestured to the clothes. "Those belong to my sister. She visited a few years back and left them behind. They should fit you better than that dress, and they are more practical for riding." "Your sister," Helena said, surprised. He'd never mentioned any family except his parents, Katie. "She is 5 years younger than me. She defied our father too, eventually. Married a school teacher, moved to Denver. We write sometimes." A slight smile touched his lips. "She would like you, I think." Helena took the clothes back into the bedroom and changed. The skirt and blouse were indeed more practical than her ruined dress, and they fit reasonably well if a bit loose. When she emerged, Flynn nodded approvingly. "Better for riding," he said. "Eat something, then we will head out." The ride to Douglas took most of the morning. Flynn saddled 2 horses, and Helena was relieved to find her riding skills were still intact despite her accident. Flynn led the way, and they rode mostly in silence, though it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. The morning was beautiful, the storm having cleared the air, leaving everything fresh and bright. The prairie stretched around them, vast and golden, broken by occasional stands of trees and rocky outcroppings. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped even in late summer. "It is beautiful," Helena said at one point. "I did not expect the West to be so beautiful." "Most people do not," Flynn said. "They see it as harsh and empty, but once you know how to look at it, once you understand it, it is the most beautiful place on earth." They stopped once to rest the horses and drink from Flynn's canteen. Helena watched as Flynn scanned the horizon, his body relaxed but alert, completely in his element out here in the open country. "You really do belong here," she said. He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Yes," he said simply, "I do." They reached Douglas by early afternoon. It was a small town, just a main street with a handful of businesses, a church, and scattered houses. Flynn led them to the general store, where a middle-aged woman looked up from her counter as they entered. "Flynn Parker," the woman said warmly. "We have not seen you in town for weeks." "Who is your friend?" "Mrs. Anderson, this is Miss Helena Everett. She got caught in the storm yesterday and took shelter at my place. She needs some supplies." Mrs. Anderson's eyes widened with curiosity, but she was too polite to pry. "Of course, dear. What do you need?" Helena bought a few practical items of clothing, a sturdy bag to carry them in, and some basic necessities. Flynn waited patiently, though she noticed several townspeople giving him curious looks, especially when it became clear he was waiting for her. As they left the store, a man stepped in front of them. He was tall and well-dressed, with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. "Flynn," the man said, his tone neutral but his eyes assessing. "Heard you had a visitor." "News travels fast," Flynn said dryly. "Sheriff Hawkins, this is Miss Helena Everett. She is headed to Casper." "Miss Everett," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "You all right? Flynn treating you well?" "Mr. Parker saved my life," Helena said firmly. "He has been nothing but a gentleman." The sheriff nodded, seeming satisfied. "Good to hear. You need help getting to Casper. I can arrange an escort if needed." "I was going to take her myself," Flynn said, and Helena's heart leaped at his words. She'd assumed he would put her on a stagecoach or find someone else to take her. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "That is a 3-day ride, Flynn. You sure about that?" "I am sure," Flynn said, his tone brooking no argument. "All right, then." The sheriff clapped Flynn on the shoulder. "You are a good man, Parker. Miss Everett, you are in good hands." They walked back to the horses, and Helena finally found her voice. "You do not have to take me all the way to Casper," she said. "The sheriff is right, that is a long journey." "I know I do not have to," Flynn said, "but I want to." "The route to Casper can be dangerous, especially for a woman traveling alone. I will see you there safely, Flynn." Helena trailed off, not sure what she wanted to say. "Thank you" seemed insufficient. The truth was, she was glad. 3 more days with him. 3 more days before she had to say goodbye and move on with her life. 3 more days to figure out what this thing between them was, if it was anything at all. They stopped at the livery to arrange for Flynn's horses to be cared for while they were gone. The stage to Casper left the next morning, but Helena found herself hoping Flynn would suggest they ride instead, and he did. "We can make better time on horseback," he said, "and we will not be stuck in a cramped coach with 6 other people." "That sounds good to me," Helena agreed. They spent the night at the small boarding house in town, in separate rooms of course, and met at dawn the next morning to begin the journey to Casper. The ride would take them through increasingly rugged country, following old trails and crossing rivers, camping under the stars at night. As they left Douglas behind, riding side by side into the rising sun, Helena felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Whatever happened, whatever this journey brought, she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The first day of travel passed pleasantly. Flynn proved to be good company, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the country they rode through. He'd traveled this route several times before, taking cattle to market in Casper, and he knew it well. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the food Mrs. Anderson had packed for them, sitting in the shade of a cottonwood tree by a small creek. "How did you learn all this?" Helena asked, gesturing to the country around them. "How to read the land, to know where to find water, all of it. Trial and error mostly," Flynn admitted. "And learning from people who knew more than me. When I first came west, I hired on with a cattle outfit. The foreman was an older man named John Redmond. He took me under his wing, taught me everything about ranching, about surviving out here. He is the one who told me about the land where I built my ranch, said it was good country that just needed someone willing to work it." "Where is he now?" Helena asked. "Died 4 years ago," Flynn said quietly. "Heart gave out, but he lived to see me get my own place, told me he was proud of me. That meant a lot. He sounds like he was a good man. The best." Flynn took a drink from his canteen, then offered it to Helena. "What about you? Who taught you to be strong enough to leave everything behind and start over?" Helena thought about that. "My Aunt Sarah, I suppose. She was always the rebel of the family. She married for love instead of money, and they disowned her for it, but she never regretted it. Her husband died young, and she moved west, made a life for herself out here. She wrote me letters about her life, about the freedom she found, and I think part of me always envied her. When I needed someone to turn to, she was the only one who understood." "You will like Casper then," Flynn said. "If your aunt is anything like you, she has probably built quite a life for herself there." They rode on, and as the afternoon wore into evening, Flynn began looking for a good place to camp. He found a spot in a sheltered hollow with good grass for the horses and a clear view of the surrounding area. Together, they unsaddled the horses and set up a simple camp. Flynn started a fire while Helena laid out the bedrolls, trying not to think about the fact that they would be sleeping just a few feet apart under the stars. Flynn cooked beans and bacon in a small pan, and they ate as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The beauty of it took Helena's breath away. "Does it ever get old?" she asked. "Seeing sunsets like this?" "Never," Flynn said. "Everyone is different, everyone is worth watching." As darkness fell, the stars came out, more stars than Helena had ever seen in her life. The sky was thick with them, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. "It is incredible," she breathed. "No city lights out here to drown them out," Flynn said. "Just the sky the way it was meant to be seen." They sat by the fire, talking quietly, until Helena could no longer keep her eyes open. She settled into her bedroll and Flynn banked the fire, then lay down in his own bedroll several feet away. But even in sleep, Helena was aware of his presence, of the solid comfort of knowing he was there, watching over her, keeping her safe. The second day brought them through more challenging terrain. They had to cross several rivers, which meant dismounting and leading the horses through the water, holding tight to the reins as the current tugged at their legs. Flynn went first each time, testing the depth and the current, then helping Helena across. His hand was warm and strong wrapped around hers, and she found herself reluctant to let go once they reached the other side. Around midday, they spotted a group of riders in the distance. Flynn's body went tense, and his hand moved to the rifle in his saddle holster. "What is it?" Helena asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "Probably nothing," Flynn said. "But stay close to me." The riders drew nearer, and Helena could make out 5 men, rough-looking and heavily armed. They changed direction slightly, angling toward Flynn and Helena, and Flynn muttered a curse under his breath. "Let me do the talking," he said quietly. The men rode up and surrounded them, their horses dancing and snorting. The leader, a man with a scarred face and cold eyes, looked Helena over in a way that made her skin crawl. "Well now," he said, "what do we have here? A cowboy and his pretty little lady, all alone out here in the middle of nowhere." "We are just passing through," Flynn said calmly. "We do not want any trouble." "Trouble?" the man laughed. "Who said anything about trouble? Maybe we are just being friendly. Maybe we want to share your camp tonight, get to know your lady friend better." Helena saw Flynn's jaw tighten, saw the way his body coiled, ready for action. "The lady is not interested," Flynn said, his voice hard as iron. "And neither am I. Move along." "That is not very neighborly," another man said. This one was younger, with mean eyes and a cruel smile. He moved his horse closer to Helena, reaching out as if to touch her, and everything happened very fast. Flynn's horse moved, putting itself between the man and Helena. At the same time, Flynn pulled his rifle from its holster, the movement smooth and practiced, and suddenly the barrel was pointed at the leader's chest. "I said move along," Flynn repeated. "I will not say it again." The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Helena held her breath, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The men looked at each other, clearly weighing their options. They outnumbered Flynn 5-1, but they'd also seen how fast he was with that rifle, and none of them seemed eager to be the first to test whether he could shoot as well as he could draw. Finally, the leader raised his hand slightly, a gesture that was almost mocking. "Easy there, cowboy. We are just having some fun. No need to get all riled up." "The fun is over," Flynn said flatly. "Ride on." The leader's eyes narrowed, but he jerked his head at his men and they turned their horses. But before they rode off, the leader looked back at Flynn and there was promise in his eyes. "We will remember you," he said. "You and your lady." Then they were gone, riding away in a cloud of dust. Flynn kept his rifle out until they were out of sight, and even then he didn't relax. "We need to move," he said. "They might double back, try to catch us when we are not expecting it." "Flynn, you are shaking," Helena said, noticing the fine tremor in his hands. "I am angry," Flynn said. "Those men, the way they looked at you, the things they were thinking. If they had touched you, I would have killed them all." The raw intensity in his voice shocked Helena. "You might have been killed," she said. "There were 5 of them." "I did not care," Flynn said, and she could hear the truth in his words. "I would not let them hurt you, I could not. Flynn." He turned to her then, and the look in his eyes stopped her breath. "We need to go," he said. "Now." They rode hard for the next several hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the men they'd encountered. Flynn kept checking behind them, his body tense, his hand never far from his rifle. Finally, as evening approached, he seemed to relax slightly. "I think we lost them," he said. "But we will keep watch tonight. I will take first watch, you try to sleep." They made camp in a rocky area that was easy to defend, with their backs to a cliff face. Flynn built a small fire, just enough to cook by, and Helena noticed he kept it as low as possible, not wanting to give away their position. "Do you think they will come after us?" she asked as they ate a quick meal. "I do not know," Flynn admitted. "Men like that, they are unpredictable. They might have just been trying to scare us, or they might have meant real harm. Either way, I am not taking chances. After they ate, Flynn insisted Helena try to sleep while he kept watch. She lay in her bedroll, but sleep seemed impossible. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. After an hour of restless turning, she sat up. "I cannot sleep," she said. Flynn was sitting with his back against a rock, his rifle across his knees, his eyes scanning the darkness. "I am sorry you had to see that today," he said. "The West can be dangerous. Men like that, they think they can take whatever they want, do whatever they want. There is not always law out here to stop them." "You stopped them," Helena said. She moved closer to him, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. "You protected me." "Of course I did," Flynn said, as if there could have been any other option. "Helena, I know we have only known each other for a few days, but I need you to understand something. While you are with me, nothing and no one is going to hurt you. I swear that on my life." "I know," Helena said softly. "I trust you completely." Flynn looked at her, and in the faint light from the fire she saw the war raging in his eyes. "You should not," he said roughly. "You should not trust me so completely. You barely know me." "I know enough," Helena said. "I know you took me in when I needed help. I know you treated me with respect and kindness. I know you have shown me more genuine care in 3 days than my fiancé showed me in 6 months. I know when those men threatened me today, you did not hesitate to put yourself in danger to protect me. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are, Helena." Her name was rough in his throat. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying." She was close to him now, close enough to see the pulse beating in his throat, to see the way his hands tightened on his rifle. "Flynn, I feel something for you. Something I have never felt before. Tell me you do not feel it too, and I will never speak of it again." The silence stretched between them. Then Flynn carefully set his rifle aside and reached out, his hand cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I cannot tell you that," he said, "because it would be a lie. I have felt it from the moment I opened my door and saw you standing there, soaked and scared and so damn brave. I have fought it, told myself it was just the circumstances, that you would forget me the moment you got to your aunt's house. But the truth is, Helena Everett, you have gotten under my skin in a way I did not think was possible." Helena leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. "Then stop fighting it," she whispered. "Stop fighting us." Flynn groaned, a sound somewhere between defeat and relief, and then his lips were on hers, and Helena felt like she was flying and drowning and burning all at once. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when Helena responded, threading her fingers through his hair and pulling him closer, it deepened into something more intense, more passionate. Flynn's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest, and she could feel his heart pounding as hard as her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "This is madness," he said. "Complete madness." "The best kind of madness," Helena said. She kissed him again, softer this time, savoring the feel of his lips on hers. "Flynn, I do not want to say goodbye to you and Casper. I cannot bear the thought of it." "Then do not," Flynn said fiercely. "Stay with me. Come back to my ranch. Build a life with me. I know I cannot offer you the comforts you are used to, and it will be a hard life, but I swear to you, Helena, I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "You already make me happy," Helena said, laughing and crying at the same time. "These 3 days with you have been the happiest of my life. The ranch, the simplicity, the freedom, it is everything I have been looking for. And you, Flynn, you are everything I did not know I needed." He kissed her again and again, as if he could not get enough, as if he was trying to make up for all the time they had not been kissing. Finally, breathless and giddy, they broke apart. "We still need to get to Casper," Flynn said, ever practical. You need to see your aunt, let her know you are all right. But then, if you are sure, truly sure, we can go back together." "I am sure," Helena said. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." They stayed up the rest of the night, talking and kissing and making plans, keeping watch together. As dawn broke, painting the sky with light, Helena felt as if she was seeing the world fresh, seeing it the way Flynn did, full of beauty and possibility. The third day of travel was the easiest, despite their lack of sleep. Helena felt like she was floating, held aloft by the sheer joy of knowing Flynn felt the same way she did, that she had not imagined this connection between them. They rode close together, their legs occasionally brushing, their eyes meeting and sharing secret smiles. "Tell me about your ranch," Helena said. "Tell me everything." So Flynn told her. He told her about the land, about the small herd of cattle he was building, about his plans to add more horses, maybe some chickens and pigs. He told her about the garden he tried to keep but always neglected, because he was better with animals than plants. He told her about the neighboring ranchers, the few he was friendly with, and the territorial disputes that sometimes arose. He painted a picture of a life that was hard but honest, challenging but rewarding, and with every word, Helena fell more in love with the idea of it and with him. "I am not much of a gardener either," Helena admitted, "but I am willing to learn. I want to learn everything, Flynn. I want to be a true partner to you." "You already are," Flynn said, "just by being you." They reached Casper late in the afternoon. It was larger than Douglas, a proper town with multiple streets, shops, hotels, and houses. Flynn had been here several times before and knew where the more established families lived. Following Helena's directions from her aunt's letters, they found the house easily, a neat cottage on a quiet street with a well-tended garden in front. Helena felt a flutter of nervousness as they dismounted. What would her aunt think of her arriving with Flynn? What would she think of Helena's plans? "Do you want me to wait here?" Flynn asked, reading her uncertainty. "No," Helena said firmly, taking his hand. "Come with me." They walked up to the door together and Helena knocked. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her early 50s, with silver-threaded brown hair and warm brown eyes that widened with surprise and delight. "Helena!" Aunt Sarah exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. "Oh, my dear girl, I have been so worried. Your letter said you would arrive weeks ago, and when you did not come, I feared the worst." "There were some delays," Helena said, hugging her aunt back fiercely. "But I am here now and I am fine. Better than fine. Aunt Sarah, this is Flynn Parker. He saved my life during a storm and he brought me here safely." Sarah turned her attention to Flynn, taking in his tall frame, his weathered face, his blue eyes, and the way he held Helena's hand. A knowing smile crossed her face. "Mr. Parker," she said warmly, "I cannot thank you enough for taking care of my niece. Please, both of you, come inside. You must be exhausted from your journey." They followed Sarah inside, into a cozy parlor filled with comfortable furniture and books. Sarah bustled about, making tea and bringing out food, all the while asking Helena questions about her journey, about her escape from Boston, about everything that had happened since she had left. Helena told the story, with Flynn occasionally adding details. She told about the storm, about taking shelter at Flynn's ranch, about the ride to Douglas, and then the journey to Casper. She left out the part about the men who had threatened them, not wanting to worry her aunt. But she could not help the way her hand tightened on Flynn's when she mentioned that part of the journey had been challenging. Sarah missed nothing. Her eyes moved between Helena and Flynn, taking in their clasped hands, the way they looked at each other, the easy comfort between them. "I see," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "And what are your plans now, my dear?" Helena took a deep breath. "Aunt Sarah," I know I wrote that I would come live with you, and I am grateful beyond words that you offered me a home. But things have changed. I have changed. I have fallen in love with Flynn and with his life, with his ranch, with the freedom and the simplicity and the honesty of it all. I want to go back with him to build a life there if you can forgive me for changing my plans." Sarah laughed, a warm, delighted sound. "Forgive you? My darling girl, there is nothing to forgive. This is exactly what I hoped for you, that you would find your own path, your own happiness. And Mr. Parker, I can see you care for her deeply. Tell me you will take good care of her." "With my life," Flynn said solemnly. "I love her, Mrs. Winters. I know it seems fast that we have only known each other a few days, but I have never been more certain of anything." "Love does not follow a schedule," Sarah said. "I knew I loved my Henry the day I met him, and we had 40 good years together before he passed. If you love each other, truly love each other, that is all that matters." She paused, then added, "Though I hope you will marry her properly, Mr. Parker. My niece deserves that respect." "I want nothing more," Flynn said, turning to Helena. "Helena, I do not have a ring, and this is not the romantic proposal you probably dreamed of as a girl, but I am asking you now in front of your aunt as witness. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my home?" Tears streamed down Helena's face as she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Flynn pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, and Sarah laughed and clapped her hands together. "Well then," she said, "we have a wedding to plan. When would you like to marry?" Flynn and Helena looked at each other. "As soon as possible," Flynn said. "I waited 26 years to find her. I do not want to wait any longer to make her my wife." "Tomorrow, then," Sarah said decisively. "I know the minister. He will marry you tomorrow afternoon. It will be a simple ceremony, but it will be legal and binding. Is that acceptable?" "It is perfect," Helena said, unable to stop smiling. They spent the evening at Sarah's house, and Flynn went to the hotel for the night, wanting to do things properly. But before he left, he pulled Helena into the shadows of Sarah's front porch and kissed her until she was dizzy. "Tomorrow," he said, "tomorrow you will be my wife." "Tomorrow cannot come fast enough," Helena replied. She barely slept that night, too excited, too nervous, too happy. Sarah had loaned her a simple but lovely dress in cream-colored silk, and in the morning she helped Helena do her hair, pinning it up with flowers from the garden. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. "Your mother would be proud despite everything. You have found real love, Helena. That is rare and precious." The ceremony was held in Sarah's parlor, with only Sarah and 2 of her friends as witnesses. The minister was a kind older man who seemed pleased to be performing a marriage that was so clearly based on love rather than obligation or convenience. Flynn wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, and when Helena walked into the room, the look on his face made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They spoke their vows, promising to love and honor each other, to stand together through whatever hardships came their way. Flynn's voice was strong and sure, and Helena's was clear despite the tears streaming down her face. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Flynn kissed her, sealing their vows, Helena felt as if her heart might burst from sheer happiness. They celebrated with a simple dinner at Sarah's house, and then, as evening fell, they said their goodbyes. Sarah hugged Helena tightly, whispering in her ear, "Be happy, my darling girl. Write to me often, and know you always have a home here if you need it." "Thank you," Helena whispered back, "for everything, for understanding, for supporting me, for being the family I needed." Flynn shook Sarah's hand, then pulled her into a hug. "Thank you for trusting me with her," he said. "I will take care of her, I swear it." "I know you will," Sarah said. "Now go, both of you, start your life together." They spent their wedding night in the hotel, and Helena discovered that the passion between them was even more intense than the kisses they had shared. Flynn was gentle and patient, making sure she was comfortable, that she felt safe, and when they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that felt like destiny. Afterward, lying in Flynn's arms, Helena felt a peace she had never known. "I love you," she said. "I know I have said it already, but I want to say it again. I love you, Flynn Parker." "And I love you, Helena Parker," Flynn said, and Helena shivered with pleasure at hearing her new name. "My wife, my home, the calm in the storm of my heart." They began the journey back to Flynn's ranch the next morning. The ride took 3 days, and every night they camped under the stars, talking and laughing and making love, learning each other's bodies and souls. By the time they arrived at the ranch, Helena felt as if she had always belonged there, as if this had always been her destination. The ranch looked beautiful in the late afternoon sun, the house small but sturdy, the barn and corral well maintained, the land stretching out around them in endless possibility. Flynn helped Helena down from her horse, then swept her up in his arms. "What are you doing?" Helena laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Flynn said. "It is tradition." He carried her into the house, and Helena looked around at what was now her home, seeing it with fresh eyes. It was simple, yes, but it was theirs. Together, they would make it into something more. Flynn set her down gently, and Helena turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. Then she turned back to Flynn and smiled. "It is perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." The first weeks of their marriage were an adjustment. Helena had to learn how to cook properly, how to tend the garden, how to care for the chickens Flynn bought in Douglas. She had to learn how to survive in a place where the nearest neighbor was miles away, where supplies had to be carefully rationed, where every day brought new challenges. But she also learned joy she had never known, the satisfaction of work well done, the pleasure of watching the sunset with Flynn's arm around her, the deep contentment of falling asleep in her husband's arms every night. Flynn taught her to ride better, to shoot, to read the weather and the land. He was patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise for her successes. And slowly, the house began to transform from a bachelor's sparse dwelling into a real home. Helena added curtains to the windows, made cushions for the chairs, planted flowers by the front door. She learned to make bread and stew and berry pies from the wild berries that grew on the property. "You are a natural," Flynn said one evening, savoring a bite of her pie. "I knew you would be." "I had a good teacher," Helena replied, leaning over to kiss him, "and good motivation. I want to make this a real home for us, for the family we will have someday." "Someday soon, I hope," Flynn said, pulling her onto his lap. "I want children with you, Helena. Little girls with your beauty and spirit, little boys I can teach to ride and rope." "We will have our family," Helena promised. "In time." The seasons changed, summer giving way to fall. Helena experienced her first Wyoming autumn, marveling at the way the cottonwood leaves turned gold, at the crisp bite in the air, at the way the light changed, becoming softer, more golden. Flynn brought in the harvest from their small garden, and together they prepared for winter, stocking supplies, cutting firewood, making sure the barn was secure, and the animals would be protected from the cold. Winter came hard and fast. Helena's first Wyoming winter was a revelation, the snow deeper than she'd ever seen, the cold more bitter than anything she'd experienced in Boston. But inside their small house, with the fire roaring and Flynn's arms around her, she was warmer than she'd ever been. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading aloud to each other, making love in their warm bed while the wind howled outside. And then, in early spring, Helena realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but hadn't wanted to say anything until she was sure. Now, watching Flynn mend a harness by the fire, she knew it was time to tell him. "Flynn," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He looked up immediately, hearing something in her tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Helena said, moving to kneel beside his chair. "I am perfect. We are perfect. Flynn, I am going to have a baby. You are going to be a father." The look on his face was something she would treasure forever. Shock, joy, wonder, love, all mixed together into an expression of pure happiness. He set aside the harness and pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Helena said, laughing and crying at the same time. "In the fall, I think. Are you happy?" "Happy." Flynn pulled back to look at her, and there were tears in his eyes. "Helena, I am the happiest man alive. You have given me everything. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I do not deserve you, but I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you." "You already are," Helena said, kissing him softly. "You have been from the start." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Helena bloomed with it. Flynn was attentive and worried, constantly making sure she was not working too hard, not lifting anything heavy, not overdoing it. It was sweet but sometimes frustrating, and finally Helena had to sit him down and explain that she was pregnant, not an invalid, and she needed to keep busy or she would go mad. "I am sorry," Flynn said, chastened. "I just want to keep you both safe." "And we will be safe," Helena assured him. "But I need to be able to live my life, to do my work. I promise I will be careful." As her belly grew, they made preparations for the baby. Flynn built a cradle from smooth pine, carving little horses into the headboard. Helena sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving over the soft fabric with wonder. They chose names, debating back and forth, finally settling on Thomas if it was a boy, after Helena's grandfather, and Margaret if it was a girl, after Flynn's grandmother. In October, on a crisp fall day with the leaves golden on the trees, Helena went into labor. Flynn rode like mad to fetch Mrs. Wilson, the midwife from the neighboring ranch, and she arrived in time to help Helena through the long hours of labor. Flynn stayed by Helena's side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement and love. And then, as the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of gold and orange, their son was born. Thomas Flynn Parker came into the world with a lusty cry, healthy and whole, with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin. "He is perfect," Flynn said, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. "Helena, he is absolutely perfect." "Yes, he is," Helena agreed, exhausted but euphoric. She reached out and Flynn carefully placed Thomas in her arms. The baby quieted immediately, looking up at his mother with unfocused blue eyes, and Helena fell completely in love. Mrs. Wilson stayed for a few days to help, making sure Helena recovered well and teaching her how to nurse the baby, how to bathe him, all the practical details of caring for a newborn. Then she left, and it was just the three of them, their new little family. Those first weeks were exhausting and overwhelming and absolutely wonderful. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, though he liked to eat every few hours around the clock. Flynn was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he fussed, changing his diapers without complaint, singing him soft cowboy songs that made Helena's heart melt. "You are so good with him," Helena said one night, watching Flynn rock their son to sleep. "He is my son," Flynn said simply. "There is nothing I would not do for him, for both of you. You are my whole world." Winter came again, and it was harder with a baby but also better, the house filled with Thomas's cries and coos, with the sound of his laughter as he grew. By spring, he was crawling, getting into everything, and Flynn had to child-proof the house, moving anything dangerous out of reach. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler, then a bright little boy who followed his father everywhere, begging to help with the horses and cattle. When he was 3, Helena became pregnant again, and in the spring they welcomed a daughter. Margaret Rose Parker was tiny and delicate, with her mother's coloring and her father's blue eyes, and both Flynn and Thomas were completely besotted with her. "She is so small," Thomas said, peering at his baby sister with wonder. "Can I hold her, Mama?" "Very carefully," Helena said, helping Thomas settle on the couch with pillows propped all around him. She placed Margaret in his arms, and the look of concentration on his face as he held his sister made both parents smile. "I will protect her," Thomas declared. "No one will ever hurt her." "I know you will," Flynn said, ruffling his son's hair. "You are a good big brother." Life settled into a new rhythm, busier but no less happy. The ranch prospered, Flynn's herd growing, his reputation as an honest rancher spreading. Other homesteaders had moved into the area over the years, and a small community had formed. There were barn raisings and quilting bees, Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations. Helena found friends among the other ranch wives, women who understood the challenges and joys of this life. When Thomas was 7 and Margaret was 4, Helena became pregnant again. This time, she gave Flynn twin sons, healthy boys they named Daniel and Robert. Flynn was overwhelmed with joy, though also slightly terrified at the prospect of 4 children. "We have our hands full now," he said, holding Daniel while Helena nursed Robert. "Yes, we do," Helena agreed, smiling at him, "but I would not change a thing." The house they'd started in was too small now for their growing family, so Flynn added on, building 2 more bedrooms and expanding the main room. It was hard work, but neighbors came to help, and in return, Flynn helped them with their projects. The community looked out for each other, knowing that survival in this harsh land required cooperation and mutual support. Helena's Aunt Sarah came to visit when the twins were a year old, making the long journey from Casper to see her great-nieces and nephews. She stayed for 2 weeks, delighting in the children and marveling at the life Helena had built. "You are happy," Sarah said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Flynn teach Thomas to rope a fence post while Margaret played with the twins in the grass. "Truly happy." "I am," Helena said. "More than I ever dreamed possible. This life, this family, Flynn, it is everything I did not know I wanted. When I fled Boston, I was running from something. But when I found Flynn, when I chose this life, I was finally running toward something, toward home." "Your parents asked about you, you know," Sarah said quietly. "In their last letter, they wanted to know if you were well." Helena was quiet for a moment. She had not spoken to her parents since leaving Boston 5 years ago, had not written despite Sarah's gentle encouragement. The wound of their rejection, of their willingness to sacrifice her happiness for social standing, had been too deep. "What did you tell them?" she asked. "The truth. That you are married to a good man, that you have 4 beautiful children, that you are happier than you have ever been." Sarah paused. "Your mother cried when she read my letter. I think they regret how things ended, though they would never admit it." Helena watched Flynn laugh as Thomas finally managed to rope the post, saw the pride on her husband's face as he praised their son. She thought of Margaret's sweet hugs, of the twins' infectious giggles, of the life she and Flynn had built together from nothing but love and determination. "Perhaps someday I will write to them," she said. "But not yet. This is my family now, these are the people who matter." I cannot let my parents' regrets overshadow my joy." "That is wise," Sarah agreed. "Live your life, my dear, be happy. That is the best revenge and the best redemption." The years continued to pass. Thomas grew tall and strong, a natural horseman like his father. Margaret was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to learn. The twins were wild and mischievous, constantly getting into trouble but impossible to stay angry at. Helena taught all her children to read and write, using the books Flynn had slowly accumulated over the years, supplemented by orders from the catalogs that reached even this remote corner of Wyoming. When Thomas turned 12, Flynn gave him his first real horse, and the boy nearly burst with pride. Helena watched as father and son rode out together, checking the herd, mending fences, doing the endless work that ranching required. Her heart swelled with love and pride for both of them. One day, when Helena was hanging laundry and watching Margaret teach the twins their letters on the porch, she reflected on how far she had come. 11 years ago, she had been a frightened city girl stumbling through a storm, desperate and alone. Now she was a ranch wife, a mother of 4, confident and capable, living a life she loved beyond measure. Flynn came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Helena said, leaning back against him. "The storm that brought me to you, how scared I was, how you opened your door and changed my life forever." "You changed my life too," Flynn said. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me to live again, to feel again. You became the calm in the storm of my heart, Helena. You still are, every day." Helena turned in his arms, looking up at the man she loved more than life itself. There were lines around his eyes now, silver threaded through his dark hair, but to her, he was as handsome as the day she met him. More so because now she knew everything about him, all his strengths and weaknesses, all his dreams and fears, and she loved every part of him. "And you are my home," she said, "my safe harbor, my greatest adventure." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that promised forever, and Helena knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had. Time continued its steady march. Thomas, at 18, began courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sensible girl named Emily who Helena approved of heartily. Margaret, at 15, was helping teach the younger children in the small school that had been built in their growing community. The twins, now 11, were still wild but showed signs of someday settling into responsible young men. And then, to everyone's surprise, including her own, Helena discovered she was pregnant again at 38. She and Flynn had assumed their family was complete, but apparently fate had other plans. "Another baby," Flynn said, wonder in his voice as he placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "At our age, are you scared?" "A little," Helena admitted, "but also happy. One more blessing, one more chance to do this all over again." Their 5th child, a daughter they named Sarah after Helena's aunt, was born in the spring. She was tiny and perfect, with red gold hair unlike anyone else in the family, and everyone doted on her shamelessly. Thomas and Emily, now married and expecting their own child, lived in a small house Flynn had helped Thomas build on a piece of land adjacent to the main ranch. Margaret helped care for baby Sarah when she was not teaching. The twins competed to make her laugh. "She is going to be spoiled rotten," Helena said, watching Daniel make ridiculous faces at his baby sister. "Absolutely," Flynn agreed, not looking concerned at all. "She is the baby. It is her right." Helena's Aunt Sarah passed away peacefully in her sleep when baby Sarah was 2. Helena mourned deeply, but was grateful she'd had those years with her aunt. grateful that Sarah had gotten to meet the granddaughter named in her honor. At the funeral in Casper, Helena saw her parents for the first time in 14 years. They had aged considerably, her father's hair completely white now, her mother thin and frail looking. When they saw Helena across the church, they both froze, and Helena saw the yearning in their faces, the regret. After the service, Helena approached them, Flynn's steady presence at her side. "Mother," she said. "Father," her mother burst into tears. "Helena, oh, my dear girl, I am so sorry. We were so wrong, so cruel. Can you ever forgive us?" Helena looked at her parents, these people who had tried to dictate her life, who had rejected her when she chose her own path. She felt Flynn's hand squeeze hers, offering support whatever she decided. "I forgive you," Helena said, and meant it. She had worked too hard for her happiness to let old bitterness poison it. "But I will not forget, and I will not pretend the past did not happen. If you want to know me now, to know my family, it will be on my terms." "Yes," her father said, his voice hoarse. "Any terms. We just want to be part of your life again if you will allow it." So Helena allowed it, cautiously at first, then more warmly as her parents proved genuine in their remorse. They came to visit the ranch, awkward and out of place but trying. They marveled at their grandchildren, at the life Helena had built, at the clear love between her and Flynn. Gradually, a tentative relationship formed, not what it might have been if they had supported her from the start, but something real nonetheless. More years passed. Thomas and Emily had 3 children of their own, making Helena a grandmother. Margaret married a young teacher who came west from Ohio, and they started a school in town. The twins, now grown men, worked the ranch alongside their father, though Daniel had started courting a girl and Robert talked about studying law. Baby Sarah, not a baby anymore, was a bright 8-year-old who loved horses as much as her father and oldest brother. Helena and Flynn were in their 40s now, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work and hard living. But they were healthy and strong, and their love had only deepened with time. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, still made love in their big bed like newlyweds, still found joy in each other's company. "You ever think about that storm?" Helena asked one evening as they sat watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "The one that brought me to your door all the time," Flynn said, pulling her closer. "Best storm of my life." "Mine too," Helena agreed. "I was so scared, so lost. And then you opened that door and everything changed." "I thought you were a vision at first," Flynn admitted. "This beautiful woman appearing out of the storm like something from a dream. I could not believe you were real." "I am real," Helena said, taking his hand and placing it over her heart. "And I am yours, always." "Always," Flynn echoed, kissing her temple. "My Helena, my love, my home." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night, secure in their love, in their life, in the family they had built together. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and well-tended, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. The house behind them was full of life and love and laughter. It was not the life Helena had been raised for, not the life anyone would have predicted for the wealthy Boston debutante she once was. But it was the life she had chosen, the life she had fought for, and it was perfect in every way that mattered. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Helena thought about the girl she had been, stumbling through that storm 11 years ago, desperate and alone and terrified. That girl could never have imagined this, could never have dreamed that running from one fate would lead her to an even better one. The storm had brought her to Flynn's door, seeking shelter from the tempest outside. But what she had found was so much more than that. She had found love, purpose, belonging. She had found her home, her family, her future. And Flynn, The lonely cowboy who had opened his door to a stranger had found his heart's peace, his soul's rest. She had sought refuge from a storm, and she had become the calm in the storm of his heart. And he had become her everything. Years continued to unfold like the pages of a beloved book. The ranch expanded, absorbing land from neighbors who retired or moved on. Thomas took over more and more of the day-to-day operations as Flynn's body began to protest the hard physical labor, though he remained active and involved. The grandchildren multiplied, filling the ranch with noise and joy during holidays and Sunday dinners. When Flynn turned 52 and Helena 49, they celebrated with a party that drew neighbors from miles around. The house and yard overflowed with people, 3 generations of family and friends who had become family over the years. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories and memories shared. As the party wound down and the guests departed, Helena stood on the porch watching the last wagon disappear down the road. Flynn came up behind her, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders as the night air turned cold. "Happy?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Beyond words," Helena said. "Look at everything we have built, Flynn. Not just the ranch, but the family, the community, the legacy we are leaving for our children and grandchildren. When I think about where I was, where we both were, before we found each other." "Do not think about that," Flynn said, turning her to face him. "We found each other, and that is all that matters. You are my greatest blessing, Helena. Every good thing in my life started the night you knocked on my door. And every good thing in mine," Helena replied, reaching up to cup his weathered face in her hands. "I love you, Flynn Parker. I have loved you since that first night, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Flynn said. "My wife, my partner, my heart. You are my everything." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, surrounded by the life they had built together. In the distance, coyotes called to each other, and somewhere in the barn, a horse whinnied. The wind carried the scent of sage and grass and home. It was a perfect moment in a life full of perfect moments, a life that had begun with a desperate flight through a storm, and had unfolded into more happiness than either of them had dared to dream. They had faced challenges and hardships, celebrated triumphs and mourned losses, but through it all, they had faced everything together, their love the constant that carried them through. As they finally turned to go inside, to the warm house full of memories and love, Helena reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had left Boston seeking freedom, seeking escape from a life that would have destroyed her spirit. She had found so much more than that. She had found her purpose, her place, her people. She had found Flynn. And Flynn, the man who had isolated himself on a remote ranch, who had thought himself content with solitude, had found that his heart had been waiting all along for the woman who would stumble out of a storm and into his life, bringing with her love and laughter and a future brighter than he had ever imagined. They had given each other everything, had built a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. Their children would carry on their legacy, working the land, raising their own families, passing down the stories of how their parents met, how a cowboy gave a woman refuge from a storm and found that she became the calm in the storm of his heart. And as they climbed into bed that night, tired but content, Flynn pulled Helena close, and they fell asleep as they had every night for nearly 30 years, wrapped in each other's arms, safe in their love, home in the truest sense of the word. The storm had brought them together, but love had made them inseparable, and that love would endure, a testament to the power of choice, of courage, of 2 souls finding each other against all odds and building something beautiful that would last for generations to come. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their love eternal. And in the quiet of the Wyoming night, with the stars shining overhead and the prairie stretching endlessly around them, Helena and Flynn Parker slept peacefully, knowing they had found everything they had ever needed in each other.